Have you ever experienced an inescapable relationship, be it with a friend, a family member, or even a partner, which ultimately brings more agony than it does peace? What if holding on turns out not to be an act of love, but instead is a kind of self-betrayal? Stoics believe that not every relationship is meant to last forever, and sometimes letting go might just be their best proof of courage. Well, how do you know when it is time to walk away? Today, we will be diving into the 5 signs that will tell you when it is time to cut someone out of your life, no matter how close they are to you, using Stoic philosophy as a guide to making such an important decision. When loyalty becomes a prison, loyalty is probably one of the most interpreted values in human relations. We are taught to stand up for the people we care about against the world and nobody. But when does loyalty turn from strength into heavy shackles tying us? The Stoics remind us to look deeper into issues and ask the burning questions formulated on our commitments. Is our loyalty being loved and respected by others, or are we hanging on due to fear, guilt, or habit? You are bound to someone who drains energy from you, belittles your effort, or emotionally invalidates you. You tell yourself, but they are family. But we have been friends for years. The amount of weight they have for you does not necessarily benefit your growth or well-being. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, taught us that we should live according to what is natural and right for the soul. When relationships feel like prisons instead of partnerships, it may be time to take stock. This does not mean severing ties rashly or out of anger. Stoicism teaches us to reason and be clear in our thinking. Ask yourself, is this person helping me become a better version of myself? Are they building me up or tearing me down through negativity, judgment, or selfishness? Loyalty means not self-sacrificing continually, but building mutual respect and appreciation. There's also the guilt factor. Simply contemplating the relationship may make you feel disloyal. However, staying within a toxic framework does not mean honoring anyone. It just continues to damage both you and the other. It may have been Seneca who wisely remarked that time is something impossible to regain, something precious, so why waste it on those who don't appreciate your worth? True loyalty is a gift, not a burden. If you find a connection weighing on your heart like a stone, it is not loyalty. It has become imprisonment. The first step towards freedom is recognizing that it is time to let go, the weight of emotional debt. Have you not ever felt that you owe someone your time, energy, or even your happiness for just having been part of your life over the years? This is the very definition of emotional debt, a subtle but heavy obligation that ties you to people, not in love or joy, but in guilt or duty. According to Stoic philosophy, authentic relationships stand on harmony rather than invisible chains of guilt-driven commitments. Just think, perhaps your childhood friend will always remind you of all that you used to have together, or a family member will conveniently play the "after all I've done for you" card. With time, this emotional scorekeeping starts feeling like a debt you will never be able to repay. Seneca, the most famous Stoics, encourages us to scrutinize these dynamics. He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary, he once said. Remaining in these relationships because you feel obligated just brings you a kind of suffering that could be avoided. Truth be told, relationships cannot be understood as an individual contract. The moment one is giving everything without getting enough in return, there's a nagging question as to what keeps him or her there. Is it for the genuine love that such a person holds within him or her, or just a fear of being judged for walking away? Such forms of relationships are hookups for appearances or tradition and leave one feeling emotionally drained, and that would not be worth living life in such a way. It may walk away because it is ungrateful and selfish. In fact, it is self-respect, not placing yourself into emotional debt. The letting go creates room for getting into relationships that are balanced, well-fed, and devoid of any unspoken obligations. Stoicism rightly translates into learning that we value our inner tranquility above all else. This will make one walk as a lighter weight, freer, and more focused on the really important relationships once he or she lets go of the emotional debt. After all, remember that you owe no one your happiness. It is for you to safeguard and nurture. Silent saboteurs. Not all threats to your peace and happiness are loud and blatant. Sometimes the most harmful people near you work quietly, under the radar. These are silent saboteurs, people who subtly undermine you and often undercut the excuse of caring or supporting you. Their words may seem harmless, however, with an undercurrent of manipulation, doubt, or control towards chipping your confidence and self-worth. Imagine a friend or family member who would always cover his or her as criticism under advice. If they toss something like, "I'm only telling you this because I care," or "I just want the best for you," he or she can then make you feel smaller, uncertain, or guilty for wanting to pursue your dreams. Their behavior is not openly hostile, and that makes it hard to recognize the sabotage. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher, once said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." Silent saboteurs do just the opposite, eroding your spirit, hiding their damage under care or affectation. These structures are extremely dangerous as they make you doubtful about your own senses. You might find yourself thinking, "Am I being overly sensitive? Am I unnecessarily exaggerating things?" But by anything or anyone that makes his or her life sexy on a constant basis, whether verbally or physically, there is no other way. To listen to inner voices. Manipulation, no matter how subtle, is manipulation. Severing ties with silent sabotage might be one of the hardest decisions you will have to make, especially considering that these are people you might have trusted or cared for years. But Stoicism teaches that truth and integrity come first. If his presence compromises the atmospheric quality of inner peace, however subtle that presence may have been, he does not belong to your life. Only mutual respect and true support can form genuine relationships. Silent sabotages may operate in obscurity, but you need not live in their dark. One should recognize their patterns, trust his instincts, and not be afraid to step back. It is regaining your confidence, your clarity, and your peace. The paradox of compassion is most likely the most outstanding feature of humanity, by virtue of which we either empathize or connect with caring attachments to others. Here is the paradox. Sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is simply walk away. This seems to go against everything intuition would insist upon. How can cutting an emotional bond with someone be called an act of kindness, especially when that person is dear to you? Yet, such an act starts to make sense in the Stoical view. Suppose someone in your life hangs on you for dear life, while never making an attempt to take charge of his/her actions or choices. You are all the time showing up to help this person out of yet another jam without anything really changing. This person would rather prop him/herself on your shoulder than learn to stand alone. Initially, this displays greatness in empathy, since it feels right. However, soon it turns to enable. The continuous safety net could unknowingly rob this human being of the means for development. Never has there been a philosopher more astounding, boastful, and spoilt than the Stoics. For one thing, they seldom ever talk about murder. They always remind us that others are not under our control. We can only control ourselves. The lesson Epictetus taught is, do not try to make others conform to your will, but let them be as they are, and learn to align yourself with nature. Their pathways may be fraught with struggles, even failures, to grow into what they are destined to be. Holding their hands through every hardship in the short term appears good compassion. In the long term, it becomes a hindrance to growth. Moving away does not necessarily mean turning your back on them. It entails establishing boundaries that may nurture your peace and provide the other person with control over his or her life. It calls for a certain amount of strength in this kind of compassion. It will leave you loose from needing to fix and from bearing with the things that are difficult without you. That is, into realizing that the person can survive without it. Stepping back is herein considered an act of self-love as much as an act of respect for their capability to grow. True compassion is not always tender, but can also have a hard side. And the tough love such as this is that both you and the other end up free to be at their best. This is a paradoxical act that is painful, yet healing and strengthening. Choosing solitude over chaos. Sometimes chaos comes in the form of constant arguments, even emotional roller coasters, or relationships that feel like walking on eggshells. It's easy to swallow all such types of turmoil when they come from loved ones, making such things to feel normal or temporary to anyone. But here is what is true. Your peace is never something for which you should settle down, no matter how many years you have been sharing or what strength the affection has between you and that person. Conferring solitude over chaos is no weakness. It's an act of courage and self-regard. At the same time, I must have said that it is true in theft, that poverty destroys the value of the principle to nobles and men. The Stoics valued above all inner calm. For, as Epictetus said, it is impossible for man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Chaos generally diverts from the purpose, clouds the mind, and makes one a bit reactive instead of reflective. When you are consistently involved in the drama of someone else, or constantly bombarding them with negativity, it is definitely hard to focus on your own growth or clarity of mind. Perhaps you are a couple whose every conversation ends up into a cyclone, an awful fight-soaked throng of spirit or anxiety-ridden silence, with tension collapsing into the other. There is a good chance you stay with him or her thinking will make things better, or because you do not want to be alone. Ask yourself this: how long have you hoped for change? When such chaotic conditions have turned into a pattern, it is unlikely that they will disappear easily without extreme input from both partners, given that the other person is not willing to meet you even halfway. You would just be sacrificing your peace for a battle that indeed cannot be waged alone. Choose solitude, but not seclusion or complete renouncing of relationships. They are the environments and connections that nourish your life. In all human dimensions, solitude is a healing, discovering, and clarifying environment. The space where one reconnects himself or herself without the hustle and bustle of conflicts that are bombarding all views. When you're in isolation, you're really letting yourself in the door for a more peaceful existence. This is not giving up on people, but it is allowing one to live away from the confusing realities without unnecessary chaos. Remember, the Stoics said that true strength lies within one's ability to stay cool even as the events unfold around him. Sometimes this is the only place you can find sanctuary from the world, in your own company.